So while you're still eating, please continue to eat. We're going to ask Phil Valentine to come up and talk to us about his story. It's powerful. Back in 2012, when I was trained, we were there for 5 days of training to become a recovery coach, and then we went back in the evening to learn to be a trainer. And I remember in the evening, I said to Phil, why did CCAR come up with this recovery coach training? And he didn't miss a beat. He looked at me and said, to enhance one's ability to care. And I've taken that with me from that day on. I am telling you that Phil and his cohort, Art Woodard, were the best teachers anybody could ask for. And as I said, from 2012, when we came back with this training, at City of Angels, we've trained about 250 recovery coaches. Phil's got some exciting things to tell you about. He just had an awesome personal experience that lasted for a long time that I hope he will impart on you. Take what he says, his story. It's important. And without further ado, the rest of our lunch is going to be devoted to Phil Valentine from CCAR. Thank you.
Hello everybody. My name is Phil Valentine, but for the grace of God, I have not had a drink or a drug since December 28th, 1987, so I recently celebrated 29 years in recovery. I'm also the Executive Director of the Connecticut Community for Addiction Recovery, CCAR for short. I've been with that organization since 1999, so this month will be 18 years. We are an organized recovery community organization. I want to talk to you a little bit about that, talk to you about my personal pathway of recovery a little bit, and talk about what's happening nationally and throw some rabbit trails in wherever I might be led. So here we go. So I told you my sobriety date was December 28, 1987, but on October 18, 1987, I stood in the birthing room of Rockville General Hospital, mesmerized by the in and out motion of a brand new baby girl, the tongue moving in. And that was the moment that I believe a power greater than myself burned its way into my soul and said, Philip, you're not alone. You have to do something about your problem. Because when I stood in that birthing room holding that baby girl, I was wildly strung out on cocaine. I'm here to tell you that I'm not proud of that fact. I'll never be proud of that fact. But after working a program for more than 29 years now, I'm no longer ashamed. And that makes all the difference in the world. And so I want to share this next piece with you. This graph I got from Jose Rivera many years ago, and this talks about potential. And for me as a kid growing up, potential was a P word. That, Phil, you're always going to live up to your potential. You have tremendous potential. And frankly, it frightened me. And so potential is on the vertical axis, time is on the horizontal. Most people achieve their potential over time in this manner. Many people in recovery, and what Jose Rivera will say, is that the dotted line represents my trajectory. Started to live to my potential, plummeted down. Some people might call that the bottom, and we could have a debate about what you might think a person's bottom is. But once I achieved recovery, I started to grow. And oftentimes your potential might even be increased more than you had thought possible. So that difference between the two lines is what he calls the power of recovery and why it's such a powerful concept. A lot of times we talk about, and I've heard it a lot this morning, about how hard it is to overcome stigma. how hard it is to talk about the addiction, to get over that. You know what? For many years I was in sales and marketing. We're not selling addiction. We're selling recovery. And instead of trying to reduce stigma, promote recovery. Because recovery is one of the easiest things in the world to sell and to market. Because who out there does not want to see hope, healing, health, redemption? These are all components of recovery. That's the power of recovery, why it's important to put a face in recovery and talk about recovery. Forget about saying we're going to reduce the stigma, because if I told you right now, do not think of a blue monkey swinging from one arm with a tree, holding a yellow banana in his hand, what have you thought about? So every time you talk about reducing stigma, you reinforce the stigma. You reinforce that image. Promote a new image. Promote what it is to be in recovery. Have you seen that image of the brain on drugs? Remember? Many years ago, the frying pan with the egg. What is your brain on recovery? Think about that. Promote that. So what have I learned in well, this thing says 28. I got to update to 29 years. And I know, can you see that way back there? You can? Good eyes. So anyway, the further I get into recovery, the less I know. Things are not as black and white as I once thought. The gray area keeps expanding. Fishing is best when you're not concerned with catching anything. Gratitude is the antidote for the poison of resentment. There is no such thing as quality time with your children. There is only quantity. And I have 5 kids. That first little girl, Colleen, she had a child in May, my first grandchild. I also have 4 other kids, Joshua 22, Samantha 20, Matthew 14, and Mary 12. They have never asked Dad, can I have some quality time with you? That question has never come up. They just want me there. Do not let a kid with a stomach flu sleep on the top bunk. There's incredible wisdom and power and the experience, strength, and hope in just one person's recovery. Let your yes mean yes, your no mean no. I can get through anything one day at a time. I didn't get sober to be miserable. The lighter the load, the further I go, the more enjoyable the journey. And I learned that on the Appalachian Trail in 2015. I'll talk very briefly about that. Live in the moment. I can get bitter or better. I always have that choice, and that choice is mine over any given situation. When in doubt about what to do next, do the next right thing, and in all times and all places, continue. So these are just some of the things I've learned in 29 years. But on March 19th, 2010, I was faced with a lump in my a lymph node in my neck. And on this picture, I just got diagnosed with stage 4 cancer of the tongue. And what recovery taught me is to do the next right thing. I had to take my little girl Mary to the daddy-daughter dance. So that's what I did. But why I want to talk about that is because I had an intense episode with the medical treatment system. I ended up with 2 inpatient chemo stays, 96-hour drips each time for a medicine that the nurse has to bring in wearing a hazmat suit. I had 39 radiation treatments, ended up with a feeding tube, lost about 85 pounds, but I have to say I'm cured. Now, I have to contrast that with somebody who goes into a medical treatment system with, let's say, an addiction. You know, when I first went into the hospital, people started cooking my family meals. They brought over casseroles. How many have ever had or heard of a family receiving a casserole when their son or daughter or family member went into treatment? Anybody? there is something that's different in how I was treated. Some other things were, I had support. So my wife was able to rally a whole troop of people behind me to pray for me, literally all over the country, all over the world. And so I think that helped. I'm seeing it more and more now on social media that when somebody does go away to treatment, prayers are asked for, support is asked for. Didn't happen so much 5, 10 years ago. And I was still able to coach. I was not ostracized, even though I was undergoing cancer treatment. They still allowed me to coach. Sometimes if you were a youth coach and you got into addiction treatment and they found out, you'd be asked to leave. But as the medication and the treatment took over, I started to become more isolated, more weak. I noticed that I believe that addiction is very similar in that it is a disease of isolation, right? At the end of my addiction, all there was a cocaine vial, a crossword puzzle, and Skoal tobacco. And if I had a little light, that's all my world was. And I know that's true for many other addicts I've talked to. If isolation is the problem and a key symptom of addiction, then connection and relationship is the power of what can heal and bring people towards recovery. Do you know what the #1 evidence-based practice, you will, of any clinical treatment is? Therapeutic alliance. Which is really, I care about you, you know? It's care. And that's what we're talking about with recovery coaches and peer-to-peer, the ability to freely care and love another person. Yes, I said the L word. And so, as I started to heal from the treatment and cure from the cancer, my family was still around me. That's not always the case where people have addiction and start into recovery. I was able to return to work. That's not always the case and speak at recovery walks. That's not always the case when people have enter into recovery. And finally, I was able to golf once again. No, not golf, but just wear those pants. I really like those pants. So finally, 5 years later, I found myself on March 19th, 2015, on the southern terminus of the Appalachian Trail, and I ended up making that entire journey, 2,189 miles, to Mount Katahdin in Maine, to put a face on recovery. 72 miles of that is in New Jersey. I never knew New Jersey was so beautiful, because I'd only seen it from Route 95 or the Jersey Turnpike. But when you got into the northwest corner, it's absolutely gorgeous. One of my favorite parts of the trail. And so the power of recovery and why it's so easy to promote is that you exceed your potential. I never thought I'd see myself here on the top of Katahdin, giving thanks to the power greater than myself. And that's another story that I have for another time. Switching gears. One of the people you want to know about is Bill White, WilliamWhitePapers.com. He's written this book called Slaying the Dragon, The History of Addiction Treatment and Recovery in America. This goes all the way to Native American talking circles, when they first dealt with alcoholism, to temperance movements, to AA, to the new recovery advocacy movement in the late 1990s. That is a picture of a temperance movement for men, the Keeley Leagues in the late 1890s or so, and there's a sign that they're posed under. I'm sure you can't read the sign, but listen to what this sign said in 1890. The law must recognize a leading fact: medical, not penal treatment reforms the drunkard. 1890s, and we're in 2017. I pose that things might not have changed all that much in 125, 130 years. And you guys all know that 70 to 80% of everybody that's in prison is there because of an alcohol or drug-related offense. Food for thought. I want to get into this next diagram just a little bit to give you some historical context of how this recovery movement and why recovery coaching is so powerful. Is that in 1935, Bill Wilson met Dr. Bob, not that Bill Wilson, a different Bill Wilson, met Dr. Bob, and they formed Alcoholics Anonymous. A couple decades later, there was a large recovery community. They started to realize they couldn't help everyone, that people were dying from detoxing from alcohol, and so they formed a treatment community. As that blossomed in the early 1970s, there was a job description called alcohol counselor, usually a person in recovery, and now today, recovery coach. Job descriptions are very similar to these alcohol counselors in the early 1970s. As in the 1980s, it was very easy to get 28 days into treatment. They were just rubber stamped, boom, boom, boom. And did some providers take advantage of that? Yes. Did insurance companies say no more? Yes, and they cut back the lengths of stay. What has never been studied is how many people from those 1980s 28-day treatment stays are still in recovery today. So the treatment and recovery communities became separated. They almost divorced one another. Early on, when you were in treatment, one of the key requirements was to be a person in recovery, to work in that field. That was mostly who worked in that field. Now, mostly, the emphasis is on education. Is that you need a license, you need a master's, you need a PhD in order to get funding. So, I'm not saying one is wrong or one is better. I think it's a both and. But people in recovery have been pushed out of the treatment system because of funding and other natural kind of causes. But now they're divorced from one another. So recovery principles need to come back into the treatment community, and the treatment is looking to connect people back into the recovery community. We've heard this too this morning. It makes no sense to invest in a treatment episode and send somebody right back to the same environment. No sense at all. Treatment is amazing at initiating recovery. Recovery community maintains and sustains it. My son, my 22-year-old son, was a soccer player. In his junior year in high school, he's the captain. He blew out his ACL. Devastating kind of turn of events for him at that time. Now he's in school to become a physical therapist because of that, so every cloud has a silver lining. He went and got surgery where they replaced his ACL, right? And he was able to come back on the soccer field, A, because of the surgery, but mostly because of how hard he worked at physical therapy, right? So what I'm saying is that a treatment episode is like the surgery for addiction. And you won't get strong in your recovery unless you have recovery supports. So recovery support services are the physical therapy to an addiction treatment episode. Make sense? And that comes in a variety of forms in a variety of ways. But as this divorce became more apparent, the recovery community actually stepped up to bridge the gap between the two worlds. And we can call the recovery community the entire community because everybody benefits. I call the recovery community people in recovery, family members, friends, and allies. And I think just about every one of us in here falls into one of those categories. We need to get back to this. We're all working in this together. I've heard a lot of that this morning as well. So what does CCAR do today as a recovery community organization, a lot like City of Angels? We put a face on recovery, we provide recovery supports, to keep it simple. And we believe you are in recovery if you say you are. There's not one form of recovery, I won't get into that too much, but there are multiple pathways of recovery. It's not all 12 steps, it's not all Christian, it's not all Buddhist-based, it's not all just white knuckling, there's many pathways. recovery coaches, the good recovery coaches, the great recovery coaches, of which City of Angels have many, they believe in multiple pathways. So although I got sober in Alcoholics Anonymous, if somebody wants to pursue wilderness or refuge recovery, which is Buddhist-based, as a recovery coach, I will support that. I am not going to drag them into AA, just because that worked for me. So, multiple pathways of recovery. Always focus on recovery potential, not the pathology. Always err on the side of the recovery and err on the side of being generous. And that's kind of what we base all our philosophies and most of our decisions on. So moving right along, recovery community centers are where we provide recovery support services. They're the field of dreams, which the tagline, build it and they will come. You open up a recovery community center, people are going to show up. And in our recovery community centers, we have 3 in Hartford, Bridgeport, and Willimantic, soon to open one in New London. When someone walks in, we just basically say, how can we help you with your recovery today? And because we started that, the people that were volunteering in these centers started to get some people saying, I need help with this, this, and this. That's where the Recovery Coach Academy was born, because our volunteers wanted some more training on how best to help the people that were coming in. Pretty simple, straightforward, like Michelle says, keep it simple. So what are some of the services we provide? Recovery coaching, telephone recovery support, an employment curriculum called Recovery Works, all recovery meetings. It says for the free all recovery meeting format, text recovery to 21,000, but you will not get the all recovery meeting format if you do that. You will get a document called The Effectiveness of Peer Services, which is actually kind of one of those evidence-based clinical, testing papers. So that will be, all you have to do is text recovery to 21000, and you will get a link to that document. Recovery training series and social events. I'm going quickly, but I really want to focus a little bit on and we help people navigate the system. So let me talk about recovery coaching in a little more detail. I found this quote recently from Roger Everett and James Selman, Coaching in the Art of Management, and it's in this book called Positive Coaching Alliance, which is all about sports. And that's why I really believe in coaching, because that's the best thing as far as recovery is concerned. The very first of the word coach in English occurred in the 1500s to refer to a particular kind of carriage, hence the root meaning of the verb to coach, like a horse-drawn carriage. And to coach means to convey a valued person from where he or she is addicted to where he or she wants to be in recovery. And that's what we're doing. We're conveying, we're helping people move along that journey. We're walking alongside them. The Recovery Coach Academy had those humble beginnings. You heard a lot about it from Kevin and Michelle, and there's people that have been trained in it. Well, this is really what it's about. We take 5 days to do 3 things. To teach people to actively listen, to ask good questions, to discover and manage your own stuff. Why? You have 3 options. You can treat that person across from you as an object, a recipient, or a resource. Oftentimes, like with enforcement, that person becomes an object. You are just going to have to do what I say because this is what the law says, and that's okay. I'm starting to hear a shift where we want to get to is to treat that person like a resource. That they might be the best resource on their own recovery. Know what they want to do, know their hopes and dreams, know their own inspirations. And so if we treat people like resources, we can foster that healing process from addiction. Make sense? As CCAR Recovery Coach has many roles. I talked about the Volunteer Plus, but these are just some of the roles, and these are also taken from, they're in the Academy, but I just wanted to share these briefly with you to give you an idea of what they do. They motivate and they cheerlead. They're an ally and a confidant. They tell the truth without blame or judgment. This is what I see. They're a role model and mentor, so a person with lived experience, if they go into the emergency department, can say, you know what, I was there 2 years ago, and this is what has happened to me. That is a powerful connection. I will help you get there. They help solve problems. They know the resources. Over the years, CCAR has treated all the people that come into our centers as resources. They know the system better than the system knows itself. Better than the people that are designing and operating the system. They know, like the Matrix, you know, they know all the back doors and the loopholes and the key masters and how to get in. That's really one of our strengths too. They are our best resources. We advocate for the person in recovery and for the recovery community in general. We organize a community to make that community soft for recovery. And we're lifestyle consultants, and we're friends and companions. And finally, we see each other as equal. Bill White has this theory, and I happen to agree with it. He believes that recovery is contagious. Think about that for a second. That if you have recovery, you can infect, maybe that's not the best word, but you can infect someone else with the recovery. And so if you have a lot of recovery carriers out in the community that are open and vocal about their recovery, more people will be likely to strive or seek recovery when they know you're in recovery. This whole thing about being anonymous has been misinterpreted over the years many different ways. There's nothing that says I have to be anonymous about my recovery at the level of press, radio, and film. I cannot represent Alcoholics Anonymous or a 12-step program. That's not what we do. Bill Wilson, Dr. Bob, Marty Mann, the first woman recovering alcoholic, were very vocal about their recovery. In fact, Marty Mann founded the National Council on Alcoholism, that is now NCADD. And she went around the country talking about that she had found a solution, but now I think we've taken an anonymity to the point where we have to be silent wherever, whenever. I think people need to put a face in recovery. Not everyone in recovery, it's for those who are called to, a vanguard. But I can tell you, after 19 years, I've been in recovery 29 years, 10 years very quiet about my recovery, the last 19 very open about it. I've never received any repercussions because of it. I think it does, my purpose in life is to carry the message of recovery and to coach recovery. Finally, one more picture of what a recovery coach is. This woman has 21 years of recovery, walking alongside someone, offering some advice or some encouragement or some motivation. The other woman seems a little upset and very grateful that she has this person in her life. I want to talk to you about one quick program. I know I'm running a little late on time here, but telephone recovery support we call because we care. In the spirit of keeping it simple, a trained person calls a recovery once a week to check in on their recovery. They follow a script, it's win-win, it gives the new recovery a shot at maintaining their recovery, relapse prevention, and helps the volunteer making the call. In the emergency department, when someone comes in the emergency department, the recovery coach is going to get a phone number, and I heard that there's sometimes difficulty with calling that phone. But part of the program is they're going to receive a call from their coach once a day for the next 10 days. So we're just going to try to follow through and see if that window opens where they might want to go to the next level for their own recovery. That would be an enhanced version of telephone recovery support. So what can one little agency do like CCAR? We enrolled 1,015 new recoveries in 2015. The numbers are up from last year. I don't have the final numbers yet. We call an average of 530 people each and every week. Right now, our roster is at 600. We called about 34,000 times. We held 10,500 conversations. There's a spiritual ripple effect that's hard to imagine. So we have a Recovery Works curriculum. I'm going through that quick. We do volunteers because our staff focuses on volunteers because they can have a greater impact, a greater reach. And then you can see that every state has a volunteer hourly rate. You just Google volunteer hourly rate, tabulate the number of hours served. You get an in-kind contribution to your agency. Last year it was $724,000 that our funders like to see, that you get some serious bang for the buck. One other resource I want to get, I just made some notes to you, is make sure you know about intherooms.com. intherooms.com, which is the largest online community. So even if you meet somebody, you can just hand them that doesn't want to go to meetings or you don't have any other resources. Most people are online. They can access a meeting online anonymously. You can just go to a meeting. You probably go on there right now, intherooms.com. One last story about, and I've told a lot of stories, which is unusual, but a fish story and why it's important to organize the recovery community. Why is this so important? So I like to fish on the Cape. New Jersey is obviously one of the best striped bass fishing meccas, holds the world record for striped bass. So we like to go out on the beach at Cape Cod. We go to this place, Newcomb Hollow. I go with my other friend in recovery, Arno. I call him Shortcast. He has one eye and half a foot. So this one particular summer day, it's Sunday, and we want to go, it's the last day of vacation, both our families are on vacation together. Let's go down to the beach and watch the sunrise. So we get to the beach, and the sun's coming up. We didn't want to fish lures because it's too much work. We just wanted to sit on our butts and watch the sunrise. And so all we had for bait was a frozen box of squid. Some of you might know that as a delicacy called calamari. I call it bait. So we took some of that bait and we just put it on our hooks. I cast way out just inside the bar. It was dead low tide. And Arno cast about 20 feet in front because that's where he likes to fish. Sun came up, beautiful day, calm, peaceful. A guy walks down the dune to our right and he's fishing metal and he hauls off right through that window up there, and he boom, 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 and he leans back and he's into a nice big fish. He lands a bluefish, and so he casts again. 3 cranks, bang, fish on, and Arno and I are brilliant, seasoned fishermen. And so we looked at each other and said, maybe we should go down there, because we did want to catch fish. And he said, yeah, maybe we should. So he picked up his rod and reeled in his bait. I picked up my rod, and as soon as that calamari moved about this far on the ocean floor, man, it was inhaled by a big striped bass. And he went out over the bar, and I hauled him back in, and about 20 minutes later, I'm standing in knee-deep water with a big finning fish. It was a fish about this big. But I didn't want to keep the fish because it was the last day of vacation, so this is a different fish. So we let him go, and the guy had come down from the point, and he said, nice fish, and saw me release it, and he walked up the dune and drove away, and Arno has half a foot and one eye, and I was dragging him up the dune, and the box of squid is dripping, and I only have one rod, and we're kind of a mess. And this guy in a Ford Explorer with 37 fly rods on top parks right on the edge. And he gets out and he has brand new Orvis waders. And he has a hat with all the flies and everything in it. And he puts his elbows on the hood of his truck, takes out his binoculars, and he's scanning up and down, looking for signs of fish activity. And he sees me coming up, and he kind of grunts and he goes, huh, anything going on? And I said, well, yeah, there was a guy out on the point. He was using metal. He caught 2 bluefish. I got a nice bass right here in the hole. You should try it. There are fish here. And he looks at me and he goes, yeah, right. And so Arno comes running up. He goes, Phil, he didn't believe you. You want me to go talk to him? And I said, Arno, I told him the truth. What he does with it is up to him. And the guy with all the latest gear, all the brand new equipment, all the evidence-based practices, got in his truck and drove away. So the point of it for me is that oftentimes we want to help people, and the system wants to help people. And remember, your system is perfectly designed for the results it's getting. The system wants to help people, but it won't, and maybe the system wants to catch fish, but it won't listen to the people that's been on the beach fishing and catching fish. And these are people in recovery out there. 23 million Americans, according to Faces and Voices, are people in recovery that are largely an untapped resource to help with this problem. Think about it. Ask a person in recovery for some help. That's it for me. Thank you, and God bless you.
I want to thank Phil, coming all the way down from Connecticut. For those of you that are new to the recovery community or just learning about the recovery community, having Phil Valentine at an event like this is like having Babe Ruth at a baseball event. How many of you are CCAR recovery coach trained? Raise your hand. Phil, they're your babies. Look at that. Raise your hand. Keep your hands up. Okay, guys, you ready? You're in recovery when?
You say you're in recovery.
Like that? It's not about us. There you go. So how do you know what you know if you don't know? All right. You have to be in recovery coach class and learn a little more. We call those artisms. We're going to get ready to break and go across for the afternoon panels. So I just want to say, as we talked about earlier, you know, some things are broken. Some things we're going to run up against, we have to figure out. Many of you here are from law enforcement. If I said S2330, does that mean anything to anybody? Raise your hand. Okay, so S2330 is a Senate bill introduced in the state of New Jersey, which establishes law enforcement assisted addiction and recovery programs. So how many of you were reached out to by our legislators who created this legislation to find out what's going on in the street? Right? Okay. You better reach out now. Senator Vitale and Senator Cody are the ones who wrote that bill. If they do not have you, law enforcement, the recovery community sitting there when they put these programs together, well, you're going to just drive away, right? And leave the fish there. So, a second thing I just want to point out is prevention doesn't work. That's what we hear, right? Prevention doesn't work. Well, let me tell you, those of us in the recovery, assisting referral treatment community, we better take some lessons from prevention. Why? Is Barbara here? Barbara, how many counties have a prevention agency?
18, but actually they're combined, so all 21.
All 21 counties have a prevention agency. How many counties have a recovery center or a drop-in center like Massachusetts? Ooh, right, right. So disproportionately, prevention doesn't work, but they have an agency in every county. We need to sit down with the prevention people and say, how do we do that? That's the other half of the equation. How do we get a recovery center? As Prosecutor Coronado talked about, you know, treatment takes it to this point. With the amount of relapses, how do we get to the next point? So just some things I wanted to raise to you that we have to work on. We have to work in this community. So we have a few minutes to work our way over. The first panel is going to be New Jersey State Police giving current trends, which is why we're here, right? That's what's causing the issues we have. We have the OD map presentation. After that, my good friends from the Baltimore, Washington, HIDA are here. And when I was visiting with them, I guess last month, Tom Carr said to me, "Oh, Kevin, let me show you something." He said, Baltimore City wanted help in identifying overdose spikes. Remember what just happened in Kensington? How many deaths down there? And he said they reached out to us, and we found out they already had the information, but they didn't do anything with it. So Tom Carr said to his crew, "What can we put together?" His guys came back with an app. We know now, those of you who are in the police departments, how many of you have responded to an overdose scene? Right? And so you have to come back to your office, fill out paperwork, fax it over to state police. OD map, anybody knows what an app is, right? It's done on the phone, real time. Wait till Tom and Jeff from HIDA show you that. And then our final panel, I believe, will be the second half of our police addiction recovery program. So the afternoon is jam-packed. Please, if you want to finish up, go to the bathroom, get some water, whatever you need. We're going to meet over in the hall as quick as possible. One more time, let's hear it for Phil Valentine.